The rancher saved the giant Apache warrior, and the chief demanded he marry his daughter. Every morning he woke before the sun and walked across the soft, dew-covered grass to check on his cattle. The air was crisp and fresh, filled with the smell of earth and wildflowers. Birds sang high above the hills, and the occasional coyote howled far in the distance. To John, this land was more than just property. It was home, and every stone, tree, and creek held a story. Life on the ranch was simple, but it was not easy. John spent his days mending fences that the wind had knocked over, moving cattle to fresh pastures, and repairing the small wooden barn that had begun to rot after years of harsh weather. Sometimes the work was exhausting, and sometimes it was lonely. Most of the neighboring ranches were miles away, and the nearest town was a full day's ride by horse. But John didn't mind. He liked the solitude. It gave him time to think, and it gave him peace. One late afternoon, John saddled his old brown horse, Dusty, and decided to ride toward the canyon on the far side of his property. The canyon was a rugged, rocky place where few people dared to go. He had explored it many times before, looking for lost cattle or checking for signs of wild animals. But today, something felt different. The wind carried a strange smell, smoky and earthy, and the shadows seemed darker than usual. Still, John was curious. He urged Dusty forward, the horse's hooves kicking up clouds of dust as they approached the canyon's edge. As he rounded a large boulder, John stopped abruptly. There, lying half-hidden among the rocks and bushes, was a man. He was enormous, taller and stronger than anyone John had ever seen, and he was badly injured. His clothes were torn and blood had stained the ground around him. At first, John froze. His heart pounded in his chest. He had heard stories of wandering warriors and dangerous encounters with outsiders, but this man didn't look threatening. He looked in pain, weak and helpless. John dismounted carefully, holding Dusty's reins tightly. "Hey," he called softly, "are you okay? Can you hear me?" The man stirred slightly but didn't speak. John could see the deep cuts on his arms and legs, and his chest heaved with labored breathing. Without thinking twice, John knew he had to help him. He ran back to the horse and lifted the man carefully onto Dusty's back. The man groaned at the movement, but he did not resist. Dusty, calm and steady, carried them down the canyon path, navigating the rocks and uneven ground with careful steps. John held on tightly, his mind racing with worry. Who was this man? Why was he here, alone and hurt? And most importantly, how could he get him to safety before it was too late? By the time they reached the ranch, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple. John led Dusty to the barn and helped the man down. He was heavier than John expected, but he managed to guide him to a soft pile of hay. Dusty nuzzled the injured man gently, as if sensing the danger had passed. John grabbed a clean cloth and some water, trying to clean the deep cuts as best he could. The man's name, John soon learned, was Tay. He spoke little at first, his voice hoarse and strained, but enough to explain that he was an Apache warrior. John had heard of the Apache, of course. They were proud and skilled people, known for their courage and connection to the land. But John had never met one up close. Now he was staring into the eyes of a man who seemed larger than life, wounded but alive. Tay's story came out slowly, between groans of pain and periods of silence. He had been traveling with his group when they were ambushed by a rival tribe. He had fought bravely but had been injured in the struggle. Left alone in the canyon, he had no way to get back to his village. John listened carefully, nodding as he cleaned and bandaged each wound. He could feel Tay's strength, even in his weakened state. This was a man used to fighting and surviving, a man who had endured more than most could imagine. Days passed, and John remained by Tay's side. He cooked simple meals of beans and bread, fetched water from the creek, and tended the wounds with care. At first, Tay was wary. He didn't speak much and watched John carefully, as if testing his intentions. But John was patient. He never rushed, never demanded, and never judged. Slowly, Tay began to relax. He started to speak more, telling John about his life in the village, about his family, and about the responsibilities he carried as a warrior. Through these conversations, John learned about the Apache way of life. They were people deeply connected to the land, living in harmony with nature and guided by respect and honor. Tay spoke of the importance of courage, of loyalty to one's family and tribe, and of protecting the weak. John felt a growing respect for the warrior, not just because of his strength, but because of his character. As Tay healed, the bond between the rancher and the warrior grew stronger. They shared stories, laughter, and even moments of silence where no words were needed. John found himself inspired by Tay's resilience and wisdom, and Tay began to trust John in ways he hadn't trusted many outsiders before. The ranch, once quiet and lonely, now buzzed with a new energy. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, John and Tay sat outside the barn, watching Dusty graze nearby. "You've saved my life," Tay said quietly. "I don't know how I can ever repay you." John shook his head. "You don't need to repay me. Anyone would do the same." Tay's eyes shone with gratitude, and for the first time since his injury, he smiled genuinely. Little did John know, this act of kindness would set in motion events that would change his life forever. Helping Tay would not only form a bond of friendship and respect, but would also introduce him to a world he had never known, a world of culture, honor, and unexpected responsibility. And it all began with a simple decision: to stop, help, and care for a man in need. The ranch became a place of healing, not just for Tay, but for John as well. He realized that life was richer when shared with others, when kindness and courage guided decisions, and when bonds were formed not by duty, but by choice. The plains stretched endlessly around him, but now, for the first time, John felt that the land was more than home. It was a place where destinies could meet, where lives could intertwine in ways he had never imagined. By the end of the first week, Tay could walk short distances without assistance. His strength returned slowly, but steadily. John continued his work on the ranch, sometimes glancing at the canyon where the warrior had first been found, wondering what adventures lay ahead. The sun rose and set, painting the skies with brilliant colors, and John knew that his simple life was about to become anything but ordinary. After the first week of recovery, Tay's strength was returning steadily. He could now walk short distances without John's help, although he still leaned on a sturdy walking stick for balance. John noticed that Tay's eyes, once filled with pain and suspicion, now held a calm, thoughtful brightness. It was clear that the warrior was not only healing physically, but also beginning to trust the rancher completely. John, too, felt a deep sense of connection. Each day spent together strengthened a friendship that neither had expected. Life on the ranch continued much as before, but now it was different. The barn, which once echoed only with the sounds of Dusty and the cattle, now had the quiet rhythm of conversation and laughter. Tay was curious about everything: how John repaired fences, how he cared for the animals, and how he managed to live alone on such a vast piece of land. In return, Tay shared his own knowledge of tracking, hunting, and understanding the land in ways John had never imagined. The two men, so different in appearance and background, discovered a shared respect for nature and hard work. One morning, John decided to take Tay on a ride across the plains. The sun had just risen, casting golden light over the rolling hills. Dusty trotted steadily, carrying them through the tall grasses and past small streams. As they rode, Tay pointed out subtle signs in the landscape: broken twigs, footprints in the dirt, and the distant shapes of birds circling above. "Every mark tells a story," Tay said quietly. "The land speaks to those who listen." John nodded, realizing that this was a lesson he had never learned in his simple life. The plains were more alive than he had ever imagined, and through Tay's eyes, he began to see their hidden secrets. Days passed, and with each one, John and Tay grew closer. They shared meals, repaired fences together, and even took turns teaching one another skills from their own lives. Tay showed John how to sharpen tools using stones and how to track animals without leaving obvious signs. John taught Tay how to mend broken harnesses and how to anticipate weather changes by observing clouds and wind patterns. It was a simple life, yet rich in learning and discovery. One evening, as they sat around a small campfire near the edge of the ranch, Tay spoke of his village. "Our people are strong because we care for each other," he said. "Every warrior has a responsibility to protect the tribe. But sometimes, even the strongest among us need help." John listened quietly, feeling the weight of Tay's words. He realized that Tay's injuries had been more than just physical. They were a test of resilience, trust, and connection. And now, John understood that helping Tay was more than an act of kindness. It was the beginning of something far greater. But not all days were peaceful. One afternoon, while checking the cattle near the far edge of the property, John noticed unusual tracks in the mud. They were larger than any animal tracks he had seen, and they moved in patterns that suggested a group rather than a single creature. He frowned, sensing potential danger. When he mentioned it to Tay, the warrior's expression darkened. "These tracks belong to outsiders," Tay said quietly. "Rival groups are near. They might be watching, waiting for an opportunity." John felt a chill run down his spine. The wide-open plains that had seemed safe and calm now carried the possibility of conflict. Determined to protect both Tay and his ranch, John began to prepare. He reinforced gates, made extra water and food available, and planned escape routes through the hills in case of emergency. Tay, despite his injuries, insisted on teaching John defensive strategies and basic combat skills. They practiced quietly, using the open fields to move silently and efficiently. Each day, John's respect for Tay grew. He admired the warrior's discipline, patience, and strategic mind. Tay, in turn, appreciated John's courage and willingness to learn. One afternoon, as the sun reached its peak, a hawk flew overhead, circling in the clear blue sky. Tay stopped mid-step and pointed toward the horizon. "They are coming," he said. John's heart pounded. Soon they could see dust rising in the distance, figures moving rapidly across the plains. Rival warriors were approaching, but they had not yet spotted the ranch. John and Tay quickly moved the cattle into a safer enclosure and positioned themselves near the barn, using it as a shield. They waited silently, hearts racing, every sense alert. The visitors turned out to be a small group of rival scouts. They were cautious, moving slowly and observing the area. John's hands shook slightly, but Tay placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Stay calm," he whispered. "We do not fight unless necessary." Strength is not always in force, but in patience and intelligence. Following Tay's advice, John watched as the scouts eventually turned away, likely convinced that no easy opportunity awaited them. Relief washed over him. He realized that courage alone was not enough. Wisdom, patience, and understanding were just as important. After the incident, Tay sat beside John on the porch of the ranch house, wiping sweat from his forehead. "You have learned quickly," Tay said, smiling faintly. "Many would panic. Few would prepare and act without fear. You are brave, John." John smiled back, feeling a sense of pride. Yet he also felt humbled. He realized how much he had underestimated the challenges of this land and the people who lived on it. Tay's guidance had been invaluable, and their bond had grown stronger through shared trials. Over the next few weeks, John continued to learn more about Tay's world. The warrior told stories of his childhood in the village, of ceremonies, and of the deep respect his people had for nature. He described rituals for planting crops, celebrating life, and honoring the spirits of ancestors. John listened with fascination, realizing how different yet beautifully harmonious this way of life was compared to his own. He saw that Tay's strength came not just from his physical abilities, but from his connection to culture, community, and tradition. One evening, as the sun painted the sky with shades of pink and gold, Tay confided in John about a troubling matter. "Our village faces threats from other tribes," he said quietly. "If they attack, many will suffer. I must return soon to help defend my people." John understood immediately. This was a test of loyalty and trust, not just for Tay, but for him as well. "I will help you," John said firmly. "If you need me, I will stand by your side." Tay's eyes shone with gratitude but also concern. "It is dangerous," he warned. "The outsiders will not hesitate to fight. You must be ready, John." In the following days, John prepared carefully. He made supplies, repaired weapons, and learned more about Tay's tactics and strategies. Dusty became an essential companion, carrying them quickly across rough terrain, and the cattle were secured safely away from any danger. John's routine of work, learning, and preparation became a rhythm, a balance of ranch life and readiness for what might come. Finally, the day came when Tay felt strong enough to leave the ranch temporarily and travel toward his village. John walked with him to the edge of the canyon, the place where they had first met. Both men paused, looking at the vast expanse of land stretching endlessly before them. "You have saved my life, John," Tay said, "and you have become more than a friend. You are part of my family now." John smiled, touched by the words. "We are stronger together," he replied. "Go safely, Tay. I will be ready if you need me." As Tay disappeared into the distance, John felt a mixture of pride, worry, and anticipation. He knew that life on the ranch would never be the same. Their bond had introduced him to a world of courage, honor, and responsibility beyond anything he had imagined. He also realized that their story was far from over. Challenges would come, difficult choices would need to be made, and new relationships would emerge, some of which could change his life forever. The plains were quiet again, but John felt a new sense of purpose. He had learned the value of trust, patience, and loyalty. He had learned that strength was not measured solely by size or power, but by character and courage. And most importantly, he had learned that true friendship could bridge worlds, cultures, and hearts. John returned to his routine on the ranch, tending cattle and repairing fences, but now with a deeper understanding of life. Each sunrise reminded him of the lessons Tay had taught him. Each breeze carried whispers of the canyon where their friendship had begun. And somewhere in the distance, John knew, Tay was returning to his village, carrying with him the story of a rancher who had saved a giant warrior, forming a bond that would forever change both their lives. The journey back to Tay's village was long and filled with quiet. Reflection. John had accompanied Tay through rolling hills, narrow valleys, and winding streams. Each step brought him closer to a world he had only heard about in stories, one of tradition, courage, and deep connection to the land. Despite the peaceful surroundings, John could feel a tension in the air. This was not just a homecoming for Tay. It was a test of loyalty, trust, and courage for both men. As they neared the village, John noticed the signs of a community that thrived in harmony with the land. Small, sturdy homes made of wood and clay were nestled among the trees. Children played near a central fire pit, laughing and chasing one another, while elders sat in quiet conversation, sharing stories and wisdom. Women moved gracefully between the homes, carrying baskets of food, tending to gardens, and teaching younger children. The village was alive with a sense of unity and purpose, a rhythm that came from generations of shared life and understanding. Tay's return did not go unnoticed. The villagers gathered near the center, curious and cautious. John could feel their eyes on him, assessing this outsider who had traveled with their warrior. Tay guided him forward, explaining briefly who John was and how he had saved his life. The elders exchanged glances, some nodding thoughtfully, others murmuring quietly. John noticed that there was a mixture of respect and skepticism. He understood. He was an outsider, a stranger to their customs, and yet he carried the weight of a heroic act. The Apache chief, Tay's father, was a tall and imposing figure. His presence commanded attention without a word. He walked slowly, leaning on a carved wooden staff, his eyes sharp and assessing. When he reached John and Tay, silence fell over the crowd. The chief's gaze studied John from head to toe, noting his strength, posture, and the calm determination in his eyes. "You have saved my son," the chief said finally, his voice deep and steady. "That is a rare act. Many would hesitate, few would risk their life for another." John bowed respectfully. "It was my choice," he said simply. "Tay needed help and I could not turn away." The chief nodded slowly, but his eyes narrowed as he considered something deeper. "In our ways, saving a warrior's life is not just an act of kindness," he said. "It is a bond of honor, and honor must be respected. To prove your loyalty and respect to my family and my people, you must accept a responsibility." John's heart skipped a beat, though he tried to remain calm. He had expected praise, perhaps gratitude, but not a responsibility that could alter his life so dramatically. "You must marry my daughter, Ayanna," the chief said, his voice firm. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. John's eyes widened in surprise. He had not expected this. Marriage to the chief's daughter was no small matter. It was a sacred bond, a symbol of trust, respect, and alliance. John swallowed hard, trying to steady his thoughts. I am honored, Chief," he said carefully, "but I must be honest. I know nothing of your ways, and I have never thought of marriage in this way. I do not wish to offend you or your daughter." The chief's eyes softened slightly, though his expression remained serious. "This is not about offense," he said. "This is about respect, courage, and honor. You have proven your strength by saving my son. You must now prove your heart. Marriage is not just about love, but about trust and loyalty. My daughter will test you. She will ensure that you are worthy. If you succeed, you will become part of our people, and our bond will be unbreakable." Tay, standing beside John, placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "She is wise and strong," he said quietly. "Ayanna will test you, yes, but she will also guide you. If your heart is true, she will accept you." John nodded, feeling a mixture of fear, respect, and determination. He realized that this was more than a challenge. It was an honor, an opportunity to prove himself not just as a friend, but as someone who could bridge two worlds. The next day, John was led to meet Ayanna. She was unlike anyone he had ever met. Tall, graceful, with eyes that shone with intelligence and curiosity, she studied him carefully from the moment he entered the village square. She did not smile immediately, nor did she speak. Instead, she observed, testing him silently with her gaze. John felt a mixture of nervousness and awe. He bowed slightly, offering a respectful greeting. "I am John," he said. "I am honored to meet you." Ayanna's expression remained calm, almost unreadable. "I have heard of you," she said softly. "You saved my brother. That is a brave thing, but courage alone is not enough. You must prove your heart, your mind, and your understanding of our ways. Only then can you be considered worthy." John nodded, understanding that this would not be simple. He was entering a world where every action, every word, and every gesture mattered. Over the following days, Ayanna devised a series of challenges for John. Some were physical, testing his strength, agility, and endurance. He carried heavy water baskets from the creek, ran across rough terrain, and helped repair the village's fences. Others were mental, testing his patience, intelligence, and ability to learn quickly. He observed the ways of the villagers, remembered small details, and followed instructions carefully. Tay guided him at times, but often John had to rely on his own judgment and intuition. The hardest challenge of all, John soon realized, was understanding Ayanna's world, the customs, beliefs, and values of her people. He spent hours learning from the elders, listening to their stories and participating in rituals. He observed how the villagers interacted with the land, treated one another, and respected the spirits of their ancestors. Each lesson brought him closer to understanding the depth of their culture and the meaning behind their traditions. As days turned into weeks, John began to notice subtle changes in his relationship with Ayanna. She remained strict and demanding, yet he saw moments of warmth in her eyes. She would offer guidance when he struggled and praise when he succeeded. Slowly, a quiet respect grew between them, built on trust, patience, and mutual understanding. John realized that this bond was more than obligation. It was forming naturally, through shared experiences and honest effort. One evening, after a long day of challenges, John and Ayanna sat near a small fire outside the village. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple as the sun set behind the hills. "You have learned much," Ayanna said quietly. "Not everyone who comes here can understand our ways. You have shown patience, courage, and respect. That is rare." John smiled, feeling a sense of pride and relief. "I only wish to honor your people," he said, "and to do what is right." Ayanna nodded, her eyes softening. "That is why you may yet be worthy," she said. "But remember, trust and loyalty are ongoing. You must continue to prove yourself, not just through action but through your heart. Our people value the strength of character above all else." John listened carefully, understanding the gravity of her words. This was more than a test. It was a lifelong commitment to integrity, respect, and shared values. Meanwhile, Tay continued to support both of them, acting as a bridge between John and the village. He offered guidance when needed, shared stories of their shared past, and reminded John that the lessons he was learning were not just for the present, but for the future. John began to feel a sense of belonging, something he had never experienced fully on his own ranch. He realized that his life was no longer confined to the open plains. It was intertwined with the people, culture, and values of Tay's village. The Apache chief watched all of this closely, observing John's progress and Ayanna's reactions. He noticed John's patience, his humility, and his genuine effort to understand their ways. The bond between John and Tay, now strengthened through shared experiences, had begun to extend naturally to the wider village. Slowly, the chief's skepticism softened into cautious approval. He recognized that John's courage and character were true, and that his loyalty could be trusted. One morning, the chief called John to his side. "You have shown honor, courage, and patience," he said. "You have respected our ways, learned our traditions, and proven your heart. You are worthy of my daughter's hand if she accepts you. Remember, this is not the end, but the beginning of your journey with our people. You must continue to live with respect, courage, and integrity." John bowed deeply, his heart swelling with a mixture of gratitude, relief, and determination. "I will do my best," he said simply. That evening, John approached Ayanna, who was quietly tending to the small fire. "I am ready to honor your people," he said softly. Ayanna studied him for a moment, then nodded. "You have earned my trust," she said, "not only because of your actions but because of your heart. If you continue to live with respect and loyalty, our bond will grow stronger each day." John felt a warmth spread through him, knowing that this was not only the acceptance he had sought, but also the beginning of a true partnership. As the stars filled the night sky, John realized that his life had changed forever. The simple act of saving Tay had led him to a world of honor, tradition, and deep connection. He had faced challenges he could never have imagined, yet each trial had strengthened him, teaching patience, courage, and humility. And now, with the chief's blessing and Ayanna's trust, John stood on the threshold of a life that was rich, meaningful, and shared with people who valued integrity above all else. The plains, once a solitary home, now felt alive with possibility. John had found friendship, trust, and a purpose greater than himself. And as he looked across the village, watching children play and elders share stories, he understood that his journey was just beginning, a journey that would test his courage, expand his heart, and bring him closer to the people he had come to respect and love. Life in the village continued, but for John, every day brought a new challenge. Though he had earned the trust of the chief and Ayana's cautious approval, he knew that true acceptance would require more than a single act of courage. He had to prove himself in ways that went beyond physical strength. It was about understanding, patience, and learning to live within a culture so different from his own. John had grown used to the quiet rhythm of his ranch, where hard work was predictable and the rules were simple. Here, every action carried meaning, and every decision had weight. Jana continued to guide him, testing his skills and his character in subtle but demanding ways. She asked him to help in the fields, teaching him the careful methods her people used to plant crops and tend to gardens. John found the work surprisingly complex. It was not enough to simply dig the soil or plant the seeds. He had to do it with awareness and respect, understanding how the land would respond. He learned to feel the rhythm of the earth, to notice the changes in the weather, and to anticipate the needs of the plants. At first he struggled, making mistakes that drew quiet criticism from Ayana. But he persisted, learning to move slowly, observe carefully, and adjust his actions. Beyond the physical work, John was challenged in ways that tested his mind and his patience. Yana asked him to observe and learn from the villagers, to understand their rituals, their storytelling, and their social customs. At first, it felt overwhelming. John was used to straightforward tasks on his ranch, where success was measured by clear results: fences mended, cattle fed, and repairs completed. Here, the lessons were subtle, requiring careful listening, reflection, and humility. John realized that true understanding would come not from words alone, but from experience and observation. One afternoon, he joined the women in preparing food for the village. They worked with a quiet rhythm, grinding grains, mixing herbs, and cooking over an open fire. John watched closely, trying to replicate their movements. He burned a few batches of bread and spilled herbs more than once, but he did not give up. Ayana observed him from a distance, occasionally offering guidance. "Patience, John," she said gently. "Every step matters. Rushing will not bring respect, only mistakes." John nodded, taking her advice to heart. By the end of the day, he had learned to move with care and purpose, realizing that success here was measured not just by results, but by the thought and respect behind each action. Meanwhile, Tay remained a constant presence, acting as a mentor and bridge between John and the village. He taught John about the strategies used by the warriors to protect the tribe, sharing lessons in observation, planning, and patience. John learned to read the land, notice the smallest signs of danger, and anticipate challenges before they arrived. These lessons were demanding, but John embraced them. Each skill he mastered gave him confidence, and each success strengthened the respect he earned from the villagers. Despite the progress, John's journey was not without setbacks. There were moments of frustration, when he felt he could never live up to the expectations of the chief, Ayana, or even Tay. There were days when he stumbled in the fields, misunderstood a ritual, or failed to notice an important detail. Each mistake was a lesson, however, and John learned to accept correction without anger or discouragement. He discovered that true growth came from persistence, humility, and a willingness to learn, no matter how difficult the task. Yana, for her part, remained a patient but demanding teacher. She did not offer praise easily, but when she did, it carried weight and meaning. She tested John not only in practical tasks, but also in understanding the emotions and needs of others. She asked him to help settle disputes between villagers, to offer guidance to younger warriors, and to show kindness in moments of conflict. John realized that these challenges were preparing him not only to be a partner to Ayana, but also to be a respected member of the tribe. One evening, after a long day of work, John and Ayana sat by a small fire outside the village. The air was cool, and the stars sparkled in the clear night sky, John felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. He had worked hard, learned much, and slowly earned the trust of the villagers. "You have come far," Ayanna said softly, her voice carrying a note of approval. "You have shown strength, patience, and understanding, but the journey is not over. True respect is earned every day through actions, choices, and heart." John nodded, understanding the depth of her words. This was not simply a test of skill, but a test of character, loyalty, and integrity. Over the following weeks, John faced challenges that tested him in unexpected ways. A sudden storm threatened the village crops, and he had to act quickly to protect the fields. He worked alongside Tay and other warriors, moving supplies, reinforcing shelters, and ensuring the safety of the people. The work was exhausting, but it revealed John's courage, quick thinking, and ability to lead in times of crisis. Ayanna watched closely, recognizing that his efforts were not just about strength, but about care, responsibility, and selflessness. John also learned the subtleties of village life, understanding how small gestures, respect for tradition, and awareness of others' needs could build trust and harmony. He observed how the villagers communicated without words, how they read each other's expressions and actions, and how they valued honesty, humility, and kindness. Slowly, John began to internalize these lessons, moving from simple participation to thoughtful engagement. He was no longer an outsider observing the culture. He was becoming a part of it. During one particularly challenging day, John was asked to lead a small group of younger warriors in a training exercise. The task required patience, clear communication, and strategic thinking. At first, the young warriors were skeptical of him, unsure if a white rancher could truly guide them. But John listened carefully, gave thoughtful instructions, and demonstrated the techniques clearly. By the end of the exercise, the warriors were not only following his guidance, but also showing respect and appreciation. John realized that leadership was about more than authority. It was about trust, clarity, and understanding the people you serve. Through these trials, John and Ayanna's bond continued to grow. Though she remained reserved, he could sense a quiet affection forming. They shared small moments of connection, a smile over a successfully repaired fence, a shared laugh while preparing food, or a quiet conversation by the fire at night. These moments were subtle but powerful, building a foundation of trust, respect, and understanding that went beyond obligation or duty. John began to realize that love was not just an emotion, but a partnership built on shared experiences, mutual support, and care. One evening, as John watched the sunset with Ayanna and Tay, he reflected on how far he had come. The man who had arrived at the village weeks earlier, unsure of himself and unfamiliar with the culture, had transformed. He had learned patience, gained wisdom, and earned the respect of a people whose ways were initially foreign to him. Tay, standing nearby, clapped him on the shoulder. "You have done well," he said quietly. "You are no longer just my friend or my brother's savior. You are becoming part of our people. Your heart, courage, and patience have proven themselves." John smiled, grateful for the acknowledgement but also humble, knowing that this journey was ongoing. The chief, too, observed John's progress. He saw the effort, the respect, and the sincerity in every action. Slowly, the chief's initial skepticism gave way to cautious approval. John's presence in the village was no longer just tolerated, it was valued. He had earned his place not through words alone, but through deeds, patience, and unwavering commitment. The journey to acceptance had been long and challenging, but it had shaped him into a man worthy of respect, trust, and the possibility of a lasting bond with Ayanna. Through it all, John understood that this journey was not about proving himself once, but about consistently living with integrity, courage, and respect. Each day brought new lessons, new challenges, and new opportunities to grow. He had learned that true acceptance was earned not through grand gestures alone, but through consistent, thoughtful action, through care for others, and through the strength of one's heart. By the end of the season, John had fully integrated into village life. He worked alongside the villagers, participated in ceremonies, and continued to learn from Ayanna, Tay, and the elders. He had earned their respect, gained their trust, and found a sense of belonging he had never experienced before. More importantly, he had discovered the true meaning of loyalty, patience, and courage, not just in action but in spirit. As the sun set behind the hills, casting a golden glow over the village, John realized that his trials and challenges had brought him closer to the people he had come to respect and care for. His bond with Ayanna had grown, founded on trust, understanding, and shared experience. Tay had regained his full strength and continued to serve as a loyal friend and guide. And the chief, once skeptical, now saw John as a man of honor, worthy of his family and his people. John understood that his life had changed forever. The simple act of saving Tay had led him to a world of courage, wisdom, and deep connection. He had faced trials that tested his patience, strength, and heart, and he had emerged stronger, wiser, and more connected than ever before. The challenges had been difficult, but they had prepared him for the future, an unknown future, full of possibilities, responsibilities, and the promise of a life shared with people who valued courage, integrity, and loyalty above all else. By the time spring arrived, the village was alive with new energy and hope. Flowers bloomed along the edges of the fields, the trees were heavy with leaves, and the air carried the songs of birds and the laughter of children. John had spent months living among the Apache people, learning their ways, sharing in their work, and growing close to Ayanna. The lessons he had faced, physical, mental, and emotional, had shaped him into someone who was not just strong, but wise, patient, and deeply connected to the people around him. The day finally came when the chief would formally bless John and Ayanna's union. It was a celebration that the entire village prepared for with care and anticipation. Colorful woven cloths were hung between the homes, small fires were lit to cook food, and the aroma of roasted meat, fresh bread, and herbs filled the air. Children ran around, playing and laughing, while elders prepared ceremonial items, carefully choosing the symbols and rituals that would honor the bond between John and Ayanna. The atmosphere was one of excitement, respect, and joy. John felt a mixture of nerves and gratitude. Though he had earned the chief's trust and Ayanna's approval through months of hard work and dedication, the thought of formally becoming part of this family was still overwhelming. He had grown to respect and love these people, and he knew that this ceremony was not just about him and Ayanna. It was a promise to uphold the values, honor, and traditions of the entire community. Dusty, his loyal horse, stood patiently nearby, sensing the importance of the day. Tay, standing by John's side, gave him a reassuring smile. "You have done all that is required," Tay said quietly. "Today is the reward of your patience, courage, and heart. You are ready." John nodded, taking a deep breath. He had faced so many challenges, from the moment he had first found Tay injured in the canyon, to the trials of village life, and finally to the careful guidance of Ayanna. Every struggle had led him to this moment, and he felt a deep sense of gratitude and purpose. The chief approached John first, his presence commanding attention. "John Harrison," the chief said, his voice steady and strong, "you have proven yourself worthy not through words alone, but through deeds, patience, and respect. You have shown loyalty to my son, understanding of my people, and courage in the face of challenges. Today, you are not just accepted, you are honored. May your heart remain true, and may you live with integrity and care for all who rely on you." John bowed deeply, his voice filled with respect. "I am honored, Chief," he said. "I will do my best to live with courage, respect, and loyalty every day." Ayanna approached next, her steps graceful and measured. She looked John in the eyes, studying him with a quiet intensity. "John," she said softly, "you have earned my trust and my respect. You have faced every challenge with patience, courage, and heart. I accept you, not just for what you have done, but for the person you are becoming. Together, we will face life's trials, support one another, and honor our people and our traditions." John felt a warmth fill his chest. The woman who had tested him, guided him, and quietly observed him for months was now standing beside him as a partner, equal in strength and understanding. The ceremony began with a gathering around the central fire of the village. Elders spoke of tradition, courage, and the bonds of family. They told stories of warriors who had protected their people, of leaders who had guided their communities, and of families who had upheld honor and respect across generations. John listened carefully, understanding that this was not just a formal ritual. It was a moment that connected him to a history and a culture far richer and older than he could have imagined. As part of the ceremony, John and Ayanna exchanged gifts. John gave Ayanna a simple leather pouch he had made himself, filled with herbs and small carved stones, a symbol of protection, respect, and care. Ayanna gave John a beautifully woven cloth, decorated with symbols representing courage, wisdom, and unity. Each gift carried meaning, and each gesture strengthened the bond between them. John felt a deep sense of connection, realizing that their union was built on understanding, shared experience, and mutual respect rather than simple obligation. The chief then placed a hand on John's shoulder. "Remember, John," he said, "strength is not measured only by muscle or skill. True strength comes from heart, patience, and integrity. You have shown this. Protect it, nurture it, and live by it. That is the greatest honor a warrior can have." John nodded solemnly. "I will," he said, his voice firm and steady. He understood that this was more than advice. It was a promise he would carry for the rest of his life. After the ceremony, the village celebrated with food, music, and dance. The air was filled with the sounds of drums, singing, and laughter. Children ran through the fields, their joy infectious, while elders shared stories and wisdom around the fires. John and Ayanna moved among the villagers, greeting people, sharing smiles, and feeling the warmth of acceptance and belonging. It was a day of unity, of joy, and of connection, a day that marked the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. As the celebration continued into the night, John took a quiet moment to reflect on his journey. He thought back to the day he had found Tay injured in the canyon, and how that single act of kindness had set in motion a chain of events that had changed his life forever. He remembered the challenges of village life, the lessons from Tay and Ayanna, and the trials that had tested his patience, courage, and understanding. Each step, each challenge had prepared him for this moment, and he felt a deep sense of gratitude for the people who had guided him along the way. Tay, standing nearby, smiled as he watched John and Ayanna. "You have done well," he said quietly. "You have become more than a friend or a savior. You are part of this community now. Your courage, patience, and heart have earned you a place among us." John smiled back, feeling a mixture of pride and humility. He understood that true achievement was not measured by personal gain, but by the trust, respect, and connection one earned through actions and character. In the days that followed, John settled fully into his new life. He continued to work alongside the villagers, tending the fields, caring for the animals, and learning new skills. But now, each action carried a deeper meaning. Every task was a chance to honor the trust he had been given, every gesture a way to strengthen bonds with the people he had come to respect and love. He and Ayanna worked together, supporting one another in daily life and growing closer with each shared experience. Their partnership was built not only on love, but on mutual respect, understanding, and shared purpose. John also took the time to strengthen his bond with the younger members of the tribe. He shared what he had learned from life on the ranch, teaching skills in observation, patience, and problem-solving. He listened to their stories, encouraged their curiosity, and guided them with patience and care. Through this, he realized that leadership was not about authority, but about influence, guidance, and example. The respect he had earned was reflected in the trust of the children, the admiration of the warriors, and the quiet approval of the elders. Tay, now fully recovered, resumed his duties as a warrior and protector of the village. He remained a loyal friend to John, offering guidance when needed and celebrating his successes. The bond between the two men, forged in the canyon during a moment of crisis, had grown stronger through shared experiences and mutual respect. They had become more than friends. They were brothers in spirit, bound by loyalty, courage, and understanding. As the seasons changed, John's life continued to flourish. The village prospered under the careful guidance of the chief, with John and Ayanna contributing in meaningful ways. Their partnership became a model for unity, cooperation, and respect. The people of the village saw in them an example of what could be achieved when hearts were open, minds were willing to learn, and actions were guided by integrity and compassion. Years later, John would look back on his journey with a deep sense of fulfillment. The act of saving Tay had led him to a life he could never have imagined, a life full of connection, purpose, and love. He had faced trials that tested his strength, patience, and character, and had emerged wiser, stronger, and more deeply connected to the people and land around him. His bond with Ayanna had grown into a partnership built on respect, understanding, and shared values. The story of John Harrison, the rancher who had saved a giant Apache warrior, became a story passed down in the village. It was told as a tale of courage, kindness, and the power of loyalty. Parents shared it with their children, not as a story of adventure alone, but as a lesson in character, patience, and respect. John had become more than a hero. He had become a symbol of unity, trust, and the strength of the human heart. As John stood on the edge of the plains one evening, watching the sun set behind the hills, he felt a profound sense of peace. Dusty grazed nearby, Ayanna stood beside him, and the sounds of the village carried softly on the breeze. He had found friendship, love, purpose, and belonging, all because he had chosen to act with courage and compassion when it mattered most. The land stretched endlessly before him, full of possibilities, challenges, and hope. And John knew that whatever the future held, he would face it with strength, heart, and the enduring bonds of family and community. The legacy of his actions, the kindness that had saved Tay, the courage that had earned the trust of the chief, and the patience that had won Ayanna's respect, would continue to inspire the people of the village for generations to come. John's life was no longer solitary or ordinary. It was intertwined with a community that valued honor, loyalty, and heart, and through these connections, he had discovered the true meaning of strength, friendship, and love.